I never told my fiancée about my full salary, but my son did by accident. So on her family anniversary dinner, my card vanished. I just used it for one small thing, she whispered. 8 hours later, my account was empty. $38,000 missing. Her dad chuckled. Family first. I didn't respond, but at 7:02 a.m., I did one quiet thing, and her phone lit up with 53 missed calls. The moment my son said it, the whole table changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Nobody dropped a fork. Nobody gasped. That would have been easier to deal with. What happened instead was worse. The room tightened in that polite, expensive way families like hers tightened when money enters the air. Dad makes way more than Uncle Trevor, Noah said, reaching for another dinner roll. Like, a lot more. He was 8. He said it the way kids say facts they don't know are loaded. Flat, honest, casual, like he was commenting on weather. Across from me, my fiancée smiled too fast. Noah, she said lightly, that's not really dinner conversation. He blinked. Why? Her father chuckled. Kids hear everything, he said. Her mother tilted her wine glass and smiled at me with that smooth social smile she used whenever she wanted control to look like Grace. Well, Maximilian does work very hard. I passed Noah the butter. Eat, buddy. He nodded and went back to his bread. But I felt it happen anyway. Every adult at that anniversary table had heard the same thing. Money. Available money. My money. We were in Naperville, Illinois, in her parents' dining room, the kind of room designed to make ordinary people sit up straighter. Long walnut table, white roses, gold-rimmed plates, candles in glass cylinders, framed family photos lining the wall behind Richard and Denise like a private museum of selective memory. There were 21 people there. Richard at the head of the table, smiling like he already knew where every conversation should end. Denise beside him, polished and composed and deadly in the quiet way. My fiancée, Alyssa, to my right. Her sister, Lana, and her husband, Trevor, across from us. An aunt who used the phrase family is everything, like it was both a prayer and a threat. 2 cousins who worked in finance, which in that family could mean anything from actual planning to expensive panic. 3 kids, and Noah, the only child there who wasn't theirs by blood. That mattered more than they ever said out loud. I'm Maximilian Hayes, 36, photographer, Aurora, Illinois. Commercial work mostly. Brand campaigns, executive portraits, corporate events, hotel launches, restaurants, private clients who want candid photos of lives that have obviously been rehearsed in advance. Before that, I shot anything that paid. Family sessions in parks, real estate listings, bar mitzvahs, holiday cards, tiny weddings in banquet halls that smelled like lemon cleaner and old resentment. I'm also Noah's dad. That's the job that makes the rest of my decisions make sense. His mother moved to Arizona after the divorce and turned distance into personal healing. She calls. She sends gifts. She posts birthday tributes online. She also once asked me in March if soccer had started yet when the season had ended in November. So mostly, it's been me and Noah. He notices things. He notices who talks to him and who talks around him. He notices when adults smile without warmth. He notices the weather inside people. That night, I noticed him noticing. At 7:11 p.m., he said it. At 7:12, Richard set down his fork and looked at me with the kind of interest men like him mistake for charm. So, he said, what does a really strong year look like in your business? I smiled. Busy. A couple people laughed. Richard smiled too. Busy isn't a number. Alyssa touched his sleeve. Dad. He ignored her. Creative work has always fascinated me. Feast or famine, right? I took a sip of water because my mouth had gone dry. Depends on the year. Denise cut into her salmon. You too will be merging lives soon. Planning matters. There it was. Planning. Their favorite word for access. Noah looked up from his plate, then at me, then around the table. Kids don't always understand content, but they understand temperature. I said very evenly, we haven't made any financial changes. Alyssa laughed a little. We're still working through logistics. Richard leaned back. Well, once you're married, what's yours is hers. Aunt Marcy nodded like he had just quoted scripture. I didn't answer. I didn't explain that commitment and unrestricted access are not the same thing. I didn't mention that I'd already been married once and had no interest in learning the same lesson with nicer floral arrangements. I didn't point out that every conversation with this family eventually found its way to money, rescue, obligations, smoothing things over, or some soft focus combination of all four. Instead, I stood up. I'm going to grab Noah's charger from the truck, I said. His tablet's almost dead. Noah looked up. Can I come? Finish your potatoes. That feels rude. That got a laugh from the far end of the table. Enough for everybody to pretend the room was normal again. I passed through the entryway on my way out and glanced at the console table near the front door. My wallet was there, brown leather, receipt sticking out, beside my keys, exactly where I'd left it. I stepped outside into the cold and stood by my truck for maybe 30 seconds longer than necessary. I didn't need the charger. I needed distance. I checked my phone. 2 client emails. One cleared deposit from a hotel campaign I'd finished the week before. Good money. Enough that if somebody saw the number without knowing the structure behind it, they'd think abundance instead of taxes, savings, school tuition, insurance, software subscriptions, gear replacement, groceries, and the quiet reality of raising a child mostly alone. That's the problem with people hearing that you do well. They don't hear structure. They hear extra. When I went back inside at 7:22, everything looked the same. Candles, hallway mirror, console table, wallet. At least I think it was still there. Memory gets weird around shock. I know I glanced toward the table. I know I felt a brief, stupid relief. I know I returned to the dining room thinking the odd part of the night had probably passed. It hadn't. Dinner rolled on. At 7:46, Trevor started talking about cash flow delays in his business. At 8:03, dessert came out. At 8:17, Richard gave a speech about marriage, sacrifice, and building as one unit. At 8:24, Denise dabbed at one eye with a napkin, the way people do when they want to be seen having tasteful emotions. At 8:41, Alyssa disappeared upstairs with Lana to get candles. At 8:55, Trevor asked whether I had ever thought about consulting because there's serious money in advising people who already know what they want. At 9:06, coffee was served. At 9:19, I went to get my wallet. It was gone. I checked the table once, then again, then under the runner, even though I knew that was stupid, then the coat bench, then my jacket pocket, then the truck, because hope makes people irrational. Nothing. When I came back inside, Alyssa was in the hallway, holding 2 dessert forks and trying very hard to look ordinary. What's wrong? She asked. My wallet is missing. She blinked once, not startled, measured. Then she lowered her voice. Oh, she said. I just used it for one small thing. I stared at her. What small thing? It was quick. For what? She glanced toward the living room, where Noah was laughing at something on one of the cousins' phones. Then she leaned closer. My dad needed to cover something before midnight. My whole body went cold and still. How much? She looked down. I don't know exactly. Richard passed us with coffee in one hand and a smile on his face, like he thought the universe had finally corrected itself in his favor. Family first, he said. I didn't respond. But 8 hours later, when I was sitting in a bank office with printed screenshots and a fraud investigator asking whether my fiancée had ever had explicit permission to move funds, I did one quiet thing, and her phone lit up with 53 missed calls. I never lied to Alyssa about money. I just never gave her the full map. She knew I did well. She knew I owned my townhouse in Aurora. She knew I had retirement savings, emergency savings, a college fund for Noah, and enough consistency that bills got paid on time and my life did not rely on hope as a financial strategy. She knew I worked hard, booked solid stretches, and sometimes landed contracts that made a quarter feel easier. What she did not know was my exact income, exact balances, exact account structure, or the full layout of what sat where. That wasn't dishonesty. That was caution. I learned the first version of that lesson in my first marriage. My ex-wife liked the visible part of success. Nice dinners after a strong month, last-minute weekends away, new gear, The appearance of ease. She did not like the invisible part. Taxes, insurance, dry spells, late paying clients. The discipline it takes to make sure a child is okay, no matter what happens next quarter. She heard, "We're doing well," and translated it to, "We can relax." I heard, "We're doing well," and translated it to, "Good, now protect it." We did not survive the difference. After the divorce, I rebuilt carefully. Apartment first, then better clients, then legal cleanup, then school stability for Noah, then the townhouse, then automatic transfers into savings, then a personal rule. No one gets the full financial picture just because they are emotionally close to me. Alyssa knew that. At first, she even admired it. "I like that you're disciplined," she told me early on, back when discipline still sounded attractive instead of obstructive. We met at a hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago. I was shooting a nonprofit gala. She was running the event floor for the planning company. Headset, clipboarder, black dress. Calm under pressure. She solved a seating disaster, redirected an angry donor, and found a missing auction item in under 10 minutes. When the event was over and I was packing my gear, she walked over and said, "You're the first photographer I've met who doesn't talk about lighting like it's a religion." I said, "It is a religion. I'm just not evangelical." She laughed. 3 weeks later, drinks. 3 months later, she met Noah at a pancake place in Geneva and brought him a disposable camera because every photographer's kid, apparently, deserved one terrible lens and one roll of chaos. Noah loved her fast. That should have felt simple. It didn't. When your child takes to someone quickly, you do not relax. You pay closer attention. The first 6 months were easy in the way beginnings are easy when everybody is still handing you the edited version of themselves. Then her family began to show up more clearly. Not all at once, in episodes. The first incident happened about 8 months in. We were eating Thai takeout on my couch. Noah was asleep upstairs. Alyssa's phone rang. It was Lana, crying hard enough that I could hear the panic from across the room. Alyssa muted the TV. "What happened?" Pause. "What do you mean, payroll?" Longer pause. Then she looked at me. That look. Half request, half expectation. "How much?" she asked. A second later, 3,000? I was already shaking my head. She went into the kitchen, finished the call, then came back and sat on the edge of the couch. "It's just a bridge," she said. "No, you don't even know the details. I know enough." Her face tightened. "Trevor had a delay. Then Trevor can fix Trevor's delay. It's payroll, Max." So, that made her blink. Not because she didn't understand, because she had expected guilt to do the lifting. "It's 1 week," she said. "You'd barely notice it." That line landed wrong immediately. You'd barely notice it. As if the morality of taking money changed if the person losing it could still sleep indoors. I said, "I would notice $3,000 leaving my account." She crossed her arms. "Sometimes you're really rigid about money." I said, "Sometimes I'm the only person in the room treating money like it belongs to someone." That fight never fully ended. 2 days later, she said, "You talk like helping my family is automatically a scam." I said, "No. I talk like urgency is not the same thing as obligation." She did not like that either. The second incident was Christmas. Denise hosted, obviously. Her whole identity was built around running gatherings that looked warm from outside and felt like evaluations from inside. Every plate matched. Every cookie tray was arranged by color and height. Every gift had perfect corners. Noah got a sweater 2 sizes too big and a puzzle clearly meant for a younger kid. Trevor's son got a drone. Lana's daughter got a tablet. One cousin's teenager got concert tickets. Noah said thank you because he has manners. Then he sat on the edge of the sofa, folding the sweater back into its box with the careful hands children use when they are trying not to look hurt in public. Later, I found him in the den reading the puzzle instructions, like maybe it would become a better gift if he understood it hard enough. In the kitchen, Denise smiled at me while arranging cookies. "You know," she said, "if you were a little more open about your finances, holiday planning would be easier." I thought I had misheard her. "I'm sorry?" She kept smiling. Expectations are tricky when people don't communicate. My income is not a holiday planning category. She laughed softly, like I was being charming instead of direct. You're very private. Yes. Well, private can read as withholding. That line stayed with me. Not because it was clever, because it was efficient. She did not say, you owe us transparency. That would have been honest. She made privacy sound like a character flaw instead. That night, after we got home, Noah stood in the kitchen while I was putting leftovers away and asked, did I do something wrong? I turned around. No. He looked down at his socks. They like me less when they're talking about money. That was the first time I saw clearly that he was reading the same room I was. I crouched down in front of him. You didn't do anything wrong. He nodded, but he still looked unconvinced. That was also the first time I realized he had started to shrink around them. The third incident happened 6 months before the anniversary dinner. We were touring wedding venues. I wanted something decent, controlled, and not financially stupid. Alyssa wanted elegant, but not too much, which in her family usually meant too much, with softer language. The planner showed us packages. Alyssa tapped one with a number I disliked immediately. That feels right. It feels expensive. My dad thinks this level makes sense. I looked at her. Your dad isn't paying. He said he may contribute. May. The favorite word of people who plan using somebody else's money. I'm not building a budget around your father's vague enthusiasm, I said. She stared at me. Why do you always talk like my family is trying to use you? I said nothing for half a second too long. That was enough. She saw the answer. Wow, she said. I said, because every time money comes up, your family suddenly appears in the middle of our decisions. She cried in the car afterward. Quiet crying. Controlled. The hardest kind to defend yourself against, because the person telling the truth always sounds cruel next to tears. They just believe family helps family, she said. I kept my eyes on the road. That depends. Who is always doing the helping? That became our loop. Not every day, not dramatic, just repeated. The family language never changed. Be flexible, don't be transactional. We all pitch in. It's only temporary. A good partner doesn't count every dollar. Family helps family. What they meant was, stop asking questions we find inconvenient, and I'll own my part. I swallowed too much for too long. Because Alyssa was good with Noah on ordinary days, because she remembered school picture day and packed extra snacks and once sat on the floor with him for an hour building a cardboard city for class. Because people are rarely awful all day long. They are mostly normal until the subject touches what they think they deserve. Because I thought patience plus clarity might teach boundaries. Because I thought repetition might eventually become respect. Because I thought if I stayed calm and boring enough about money, her family would eventually understand some lines were real. I thought it was temporary. It wasn't. The moment that should have ended everything happened 3 months before the anniversary dinner. We were at Richard and Denise's for football, food, and noise. Noah was in the den drawing superheroes with camera helmets. Richard wandered in with a drink and stood over him. What's this one? He asked. Noah pointed at the page. He rescues people and also takes evidence pictures. Richard laughed. Nice. Your dad should put that money to work and get you into one of those elite academies. Kids like you need the right rooms. I stepped into the doorway. He's in the right school. Richard smiled at me like I was being tense over nothing. I'm just saying resources should be used strategically. Noah lowered his eyes and turned the page. That tiny movement bothered me more than the sentence. That folding inward. That learned smallness. I recognized it because I used to do it too. There's a stage in a bad relationship where nothing is dramatic enough to justify ending it in one clean move, but everything is cumulative enough to make you tired all the time. That was where I was. Alyssa never said, give me direct access to your money. She was smarter than that. She built arguments around trust, partnership, future. She talked about how strange it felt to be trusted with my heart but not my numbers. She made privacy sound like distance, and distance sound like doubt. At first it was soft. Can you put me on that account in case of emergencies? No. Why not? Because emergencies are not solved by changing ownership. You make everything sound like a legal document. Legal documents survive feelings. She hated that answer. Then it got more practical. Denise called one Sunday asking whether I knew a discreet tax person because Richard's books were temporarily tangled. Trevor asked whether I ever used business credit lines to smooth cash flow, and whether banks moved faster when somebody had strong personal reserves. Lana wanted to know how easy it was to connect outside accounts to transfer platforms, and whether both people had to be present. Questions are never just questions in families like that. Questions are scouting. A month before the anniversary dinner, Alyssa stayed late in my office while I edited a hotel campaign. She sat on the sofa scrolling floral ideas and said casually, "You know, if we ever hit a rough patch, I'd hope we'd treat money like a shared problem." I kept editing. Shared problem, yes. Shared access, no. She sighed. That sounds paranoid. It sounds specific. Specific to what? Past experience. Her voice softened then, which should have warned me. Softness was often the approach angle for persuasion. "I'm not your ex. No. Then why am I living under rules she created?" That was a clean line. Personal, smart, designed to make me feel unfair. I turned my chair toward her. "You're living under rules I created after learning what happens when I don't have them." She held my gaze. "Do you even know how lonely it is to be trusted with your heart, but not your numbers?" I said. "Numbers matter more when hearts go bad." She stood up and left the room. The next morning, she acted normal. Coffee. Kiss on the cheek. Asked Noah if he wanted strawberries with breakfast. That was part of what kept me off balance. She could move from ugly conversation back to domestic normalcy so fast that I started questioning whether I had imagined the ugliness. Then there were the little signs. She once asked lightly whether I still kept the house deed in the blue folder in the office. I said, "Why?" "Just wondering where everything will go after the wedding." Another time, she asked whether I had updated retirement beneficiaries yet, for planning purposes. I actually laughed at that one. No beneficiary conversations until after a prenup and after we are legally married. She rolled her eyes. "God, you love paperwork. Paperwork has never stolen from me." She didn't answer. A week before the anniversary dinner, Richard cornered me near the grill. "You know," he said, "a man builds more when he joins forces." I kept my face neutral. "Depends who he's joining." He smiled. "Marriage is about loosening the grip a little." On what? Control. That was the word he chose. Not caution, not structure. Control. I said, "I have a son. I'm not loosening anything that affects him." He sipped his drink. "You're always talking about the boy like the rest of the world needs permission to matter." That line sat in my chest for hours, because what he meant was obvious. Noah was an inconvenience in the math, a factor I kept insisting on that they did not want treated as central. That same week, Noah asked me while he was drawing at the kitchen table, "Why does Mr. Richard talk like I'm not there?" I looked up from my laptop. "What do you mean?" "He says stuff about me like I'm furniture." I had to look away for a second, so my face didn't betray me. "What did he say?" "He said I should be in a better room because I'm expensive." Kids tell you the worst things in the flattest tone because they haven't learned which details are supposed to set adults on fire. I sat down beside him. "You are not expensive. You are my kid." He nodded, but he bent closer to the paper afterward, shoulders tucked in. I should have ended it then. I didn't, because leaving an engagement is not small, because people ask what happened and then sort your answer through their own assumptions. Because once your child knows someone, ending it means explaining absence, not just enforcing a boundary. Because part of being an adult is admitting you stayed too long not because you were blind, but because you hoped repetition would eventually become respect. It never does. It just gives entitlement more time to study the locks. I got Noah home at 10:31 p.m. He fell asleep in the truck on the drive back to Aurora, one sneaker half off, cheek pressed against the seatbelt. I carried him upstairs, tucked him into bed, and stood there for a second looking at his face in the blue glow of his nightlight. Then I went downstairs, sat at my kitchen table, opened my banking app, and saw my available balance. $412.83. I checked again, then from the desktop site, then from another browser. Same number. Checking almost drained. Savings transfer out. Brokerage liquidation request pending. 3 cash advances. 2 retail charges. 1 transfer to an outside business account I did not recognize. Total missing by 10:46 p.m. $38,000. I didn't yell. That's not how shock always works. Sometimes your body goes very still because it is trying to decide whether the fear is real before it releases the panic. Then my hands went numb. Not shaking, numb. I started taking screenshots. Every transaction, every timestamp, every page. Then I opened our text thread. Me. What exactly did you use my wallet and card for? Typing. Stopped. Typing again. Alyssa. It got complicated. Me. That is not an answer. Alyssa. My dad was supposed to move money back tonight. Me. How much did you take? Long pause. Alyssa. Please don't spiral. That line flipped something in me, as if anger were the unstable part of this situation. Me. How much? Alyssa. I didn't realize linking the external account would pull from savings too. I stared at that sentence. Linking the external account. Not one card swipe. Not one emergency purchase. She had used account information, routing numbers, enough to connect and move money. 2 weeks earlier, I had been in my office trying to pay a vendor while unpacking gear. I remembered asking her to read me a routing number from a tax file because my hands were covered in dust from light stands. She had been behind my desk, laptop open, files visible. She must have taken pictures, or forwarded something, or captured a verification screen, maybe all 3. Me. What account did the money go to? No answer. Instead, my phone rang. Richard. I let it ring, then Denise, then Lana, then Alyssa, then Trevor. I turned the phone face down and called the bank fraud line. 43 minutes. Verification questions. Recent transactions. Linked institutions. Whether anybody in my household had permission. Whether a romantic partner had ever been granted access. Whether I recognized the recipient business account. I answered. In a voice so calm, the woman on the line finally paused and asked, Sir, are you alone right now? Yes. Are you safe? I'm at home. No, I mean, is anyone there pressuring you? No. She froze the checking account, flagged the savings transfer, locked the debit card, suspended outgoing online movement, and told me to be at a branch first thing in the morning because the involvement of a known intimate partner changed the process. A known intimate partner. Such a clean phrase for someone who sat at your table and stole from your child's future. At 11:58 p.m., Alyssa texted again. Alyssa, it's not what you think. Me. Then tell me where the money is. Alyssa, Dad had a tax deadline and Trevor had payroll issues. And once we moved, one thing, it made sense to consolidate. Consolidate. I read that word 3 times. Me. You stole $38,000. Alyssa, don't use that word. Me. It is the correct word. Alyssa, we were going to put it back Monday. Me. With what money? No answer. At 12:12 a.m., Lana texted me directly. Lana, please don't ruin this family over a misunderstanding. At 12:14, Denise, adults sometimes have to move money quickly. This can be corrected privately. At 12:18, Richard, marriage means learning not to count every dollar. I saved that one separately. Then I opened a folder on my desktop and named it Receipts. Into it went bank screenshots, texts, call logs, a photo from the dinner showing the timeline, the calendar invite, my notes, a screenshot of my location history showing when I had stepped outside. At 12:31 a.m., I made coffee because sleep had become irrelevant. At 12:47, I searched my email trash and found a deleted external account verification email from 2 weeks earlier. Opened, deleted. Not by me. At 12:58, I changed my email password. At 1:02, I changed every financial password I could still reach. At 1:07, someone knocked. Alyssa. Noah was asleep upstairs. She knocked softly at first, then harder. Max, she called. Please open the door. I stood in the hallway but didn't unlock it. Go home. Don't do this through a door. You already did this through my bank account. Silence. Then, smaller, I said I'm sorry. Where is the money? It's moving back. From where? She exhaled sharply, and the apology thinned. Why are you talking like I'm a criminal? Because you took money you did not have permission to take. It was for family. It was for your family. We're getting married. We were. That landed, Max. No. Dad was embarrassed, she said quickly. Trevor had people depending on him. You don't understand the pressure. One dinner, one night. That's all it took for you to decide my son's security was available. You always do this. Do what? You act like money is sacred and people are optional. I leaned my forehead against the wall. Noah is not optional. She went quiet. For 1 second, I thought shame had found her. Then she said, low and cold, you always hide behind him when you don't want to be generous. That ended something in me completely. Go home. She knocked again. Please open the door. I didn't. After a minute, she said, are you seriously choosing pride over us? I said, I'm choosing documentation over denial. She left at 1:19 a.m. At 1:33, Trevor called twice. At 1:39, Richard texted, Richard, men settle things directly. Call me. I did not. At 2:04 a.m., I emailed my attorney, Melissa Crane, mid-40s, sharp, not warm until warmth is useful. She had helped with part of my divorce cleanup. Subject line, urgent fraud by fiancé and family. Attachments, everything. At 2:17, because panic makes me think in systems, I emailed Noah's school and removed Alyssa from the emergency contact and pickup list. At 2:24, I updated the parent portal. At 2:31, I texted my neighbor Caleb, me, if anyone shows up at my house tomorrow, call me before opening anything. Caleb, you okay? Me, no. Caleb, copy. At 3:02, I wrote a timeline. 7:11 p.m. Noah mentions salary. 7:12 p.m. Richard asks about numbers. 7:19 to 7:22 p.m. I step outside. 9:19 p.m. wallet discovered missing. 9:20 p.m. Alyssa admits use. 10:46 p.m. missing funds confirmed. 11:03 p.m. fraud line called. 11:58 p.m. written admission begins. 12:18 a.m. Richard minimizes in writing. 1:07 a.m. Alyssa arrives at my home. At 3:44, I found another deleted verification email. At 4:10, Alyssa texted, Alyssa, if you make this official, my dad will lose contracts. Not I'm sorry, not Noah, not us. Contracts. Me, then he should not have participated in fraud. At 4:18, Alyssa, I was trying to help build our future. I didn't answer, because that was the moment I stopped arguing and started documenting. At 6:14 a.m., I showered, dressed, and made more coffee I did not need. At 6:29, Melissa called. I read everything, she said. Okay, do not meet them. Do not accept verbal promises. Do not unlock anything until the bank tells you to. You are filing a police report and an in-person fraud affidavit this morning. Okay, and Maximilian? Yeah, text her once. Ask for the exact amount taken, destination accounts, and whether she had explicit permission. People who still believe they're morally right often write extremely useful things. She was right. At 6:41, I texted Alyssa, me, send the full amount taken, the destination accounts, and whether you had my explicit permission I needed in writing. At 6:44, Alyssa, I did not have explicit permission, but we are engaged and I believed it was understood that I could use what was needed for urgent family obligations. I read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Melissa. At 6:47, Alyssa, Dad's business account got $22K. Trevor got $11K. The rest was cash advances and the bracelet for Mom because I couldn't let the whole anniversary fall apart. The bracelet. That detail made me angrier than the larger amounts for one irrational second. Because it was decorative. Because Denise had sat at that table talking about commitment, while her daughter quietly financed jewelry with money meant to protect my son. At 6:52, Melissa replied. This is strong evidence. Proceed with institutional notifications now. At 6:58, I opened the wedding planning group chat. Me, Alyssa, Richard, Denise, Lana, Trevor, the venue coordinator, florist, planner, DJ, and Alyssa's maid of honor. I typed one sentence. No one connected to Alyssa Mercer has permission to access me, my home, my child, my accounts, or any property in my name effective immediately. Then I attached screenshots, her written admission, her breakdown of the transfers, Richard's message about not counting every dollar, the bank screen showing the missing $38,000. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Typing bubbles appeared immediately. Denise, remove that now. Lana, are you insane? Richard, call me before you embarrass yourself further. Venue coordinator, I'm sorry, should all payment methods be frozen? That one mattered. Me, yes. Freeze all payment activity pending fraud review. At 7:02 a.m., I called the venue and removed every payment authorization tied to my accounts. Then the florist, then the rental company, then the hotel block, then the DJ, then the jeweler in Oak Brook where the bracelet purchase was still pending. The woman on the phone sounded cheerful until I gave her the transaction number and said that purchase was unauthorized. The funds were stolen. I need the item held. Her tone changed immediately. One moment, sir. Pause. Then, the piece is currently on hold for pickup later this morning. I'm placing an immediate fraud alert and notifying our manager. That was the quiet thing. I didn't yell. I didn't drive over. I didn't threaten anyone. I cut off the money trail while they were still waking up. By 7:09, Alyssa's phone started exploding. I know, because mine did too. She called, again, then from her office line, then from Juana's phone, then Denise's, then Richard's, then two numbers I didn't know. By 8:03 a.m., I had 53 missed calls. At 8:16, I was sitting in a bank branch with a banker named Elena who looked like she had no patience for emotion without evidence. I handed her my ID, the screenshots, the texts, the deleted verification emails, the timeline, and the printed statements. She read quietly. Then she looked up and said, "You were targeted after your income was disclosed." That sentence landed harder than almost anything else that day. Targeted, not misunderstood, not entangled. Targeted. I nodded. Yes. She pushed the fraud packet toward me. Sign here, here, and here. There are moments when paperwork feels holier than prayer. That was one of them. At 8:49, the bank investigator, joined by speakerphone, did she have authorization? No. Did you ever grant ongoing permission for family-related use? No. Was she listed as a signer or authorized user? No. Did she identify destination accounts in writing? Yes. Did she confirm? Lack of explicit permission. Yes. At 9:04, I filed the police report. Detective Harris had the tired look of a man who had seen every version of selfishness and still disliked this one. He read through the printed texts. When he got to Richard's line about not counting every dollar, he looked up at me. This man thought he sounded clever. He usually does. He nodded. Not today. He asked the questions plainly. Did she obtain financial information without authorization? Yes. Did she transfer funds to herself or others? Yes. Did the recipients know the funds were unauthorized? Based on the messages? Yes. Did I want to pursue charges? Yes. It came out calm, immediate. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted reality named correctly. At 10:12, Melissa sent preservation notices to Alyssa, Richard, and Trevor. Preserve all texts, emails, transfer records, purchase records, call logs. Do not alter, do not delete. At 10:27, she called again. Richard's attorney left me a voicemail. That was fast. He wants to discuss restorative resolution. I laughed once. Of course he does. Which means they're scared. Good. At 10:41, Denise emailed me. Whatever you think happened, involving police is beneath all of us. I replied with one sentence. It was beneath you before you took the money. Then I blocked her. At 11:03, Alyssa came to my house. This time, she pounded on the door. Noah was home because I kept him out of school. He stood halfway down the stairs in dinosaur pajama pants, face pale, eyes fixed on me. Stay there, I said. She hit the door again. Max, open the door! I stepped into view through the side glass, but I kept the deadbolt in place. You're humiliating me, she shouted. You stole from me. I said I was fixing it. You said your father got $22,000. Her face was blotchy now. You didn't have to make this public. I made it documented. You sent screenshots to vendors. Yes. Dad says if you drop this, we can move money by Monday. I already filed. She went still. You what? I filed. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. How could you do that to us? Noah made one small, sharp sound on the stairs. I kept my eyes on Alyssa and said, how could you do that to him? She finally looked up and saw Noah. For half a second, shame crossed her face. Then it vanished. You're teaching him to destroy family, she said. From the staircase, before I could answer, Noah spoke in a quiet voice. I just told the truth. No one moved. Then I said the boundary exactly once. This engagement is over. Do not come back here. All communication goes through counsel. That was it. No speech, no begging, no dramatic explanation. She lost control anyway. Not movie style. Worse. Fast, ugly entitlement. You paranoid? Selfish. She stopped herself, glanced at Noah again, and lowered her voice. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. No, I said. You already did. She stood there another second like she couldn't believe the door and I were both staying shut. Then she left. At 11:14 a.m., I changed the locks. She didn't have a key. That wasn't the point. Irreversible steps matter. They tell your body the line is real. Money came back in stages, not because anyone developed a conscience, because systems work better than families who rely on soft words and moral blackmail. Within 48 hours, the bracelet purchase was stopped. Within 3 business days, the cash advances were under review. By day 6, $24,000 had been reversed, frozen, or returned under pressure from the bank, the fraud team, and Melissa's written demands. Trevor sent back part of his transfer first, probably after somebody explained receiving stolen funds in language he couldn't smile through. Richard took longer. Men like him always do. They mistake confidence for legal strategy. His attorney eventually claimed Richard believed the transfer was a voluntarily extended family loan. Melissa responded by attaching Alyssa's own written admission that she did not have explicit permission and that the money had been redistributed after the dinner without my authorization. That ended his poetic phase quickly. The rest moved into civil recovery, account review, and criminal exposure. Melissa handled the parts that required sharp edges. I let her. Alyssa sent 3 apology emails over the next 2 weeks. The first blamed stress. The second blamed her father. The third said she had lost perspective because she saw us as already one unit. None of them used the word stole. None of them mentioned Noah until the last paragraph. That told me enough. I never answered. Denise sent a gift basket to my porch. Imported crackers, pears, expensive tea, and a note in delicate handwriting. Families survive hard moments when pride softens. I donated the basket, unopened, and threw the note away. Aunt Marcy texted from a new number. Years from now, you'll regret choosing punishment over grace. Blocked. Lana sent one message late at night. For what it's worth, Dad pushed most of it. I didn't answer that either. For what it's worth is what people say when they want moral credit without risk. The wedding was canceled officially. Some deposits were lost. I did not care. I sold the ring through a jeweler in the city and took the loss without ceremony. That's all some relationships become in the end. Expensive education. Peace returned quietly. That's how real peace works. It doesn't make speeches. One Saturday morning, Noah sat at the kitchen counter lining up blueberries by size. He looked up and asked, "Are we still getting married to Alyssa?" No. He nodded and ate one berry. Okay, that was it. Children don't always need the full legal summary. They just need the truth to stop moving. Another night, we built a blanket fort in the living room because he decided the couch needed architecture. He pulled out the disposable camera Alyssa had once given him and asked, "Can I still keep this?" Of course. Even if she was bad? I thought about that for a second. Then I said, "Someone can give you something nice and still not be safe." He nodded like he was storing that somewhere important. At work, life kept moving. spring hotel campaigns, graduation portraits, a restaurant rebrand, a 3-day executive summit where everyone wanted natural, candid moments while carefully rehearsing every handshake. I tightened every system I had: new bank, new passwords, hardware security key, no saved credentials, locked file drawer, updated will, updated beneficiaries, updated guardianship paperwork for Noah if anything ever happens to me. That last one hit harder than I expected. Because theft is one thing. Realizing someone smiled at your child while quietly treating his future like spare inventory is another. A month later, I saw Alyssa once. Not up close. I was shooting a corporate luncheon downtown. She was across the hotel lobby with a clipboard and 2 assistants. Hair perfect, posture straight, face composed in the way people get when they are trying to turn collapse into a scheduling issue. She saw me, stopped, took 1/2 step forward. I gave her a small nod. Nothing warm, nothing cruel, just recognition. Then I turned and went back to work. That night, Noah and I ate burgers in the truck by the river because fries taste better without table manners, and because kids sometimes talk more honestly when there are no plates to protect. He dipped one in ketchup and asked, "Do grown-ups say family a lot when they know they're wrong?" I looked at him. Sometimes. He nodded. That seems fake. It is. He ate another fry, then asked the real question. Are we okay? That question is the whole job. I said, yeah, we're okay. And we were. Not because it didn't hurt. Not because the money came back fast enough to erase what happened. Not because paperwork feels good. We were okay because the line held. Because the truth stayed named. Because I didn't let soft voices and expensive centerpieces turn theft into love. Because my son watched one adult in that story choose facts over performance. A few weeks later, his teacher emailed me a school writing assignment about honesty. One line in it made me sit back in my chair and stare at the screen for a while. Sometimes telling the truth makes bad people mad, but it still helps the right people know what to do. I saved that line. That's the part people miss when they talk about keeping the peace. Peace is not pretending. Peace is what shows up after pretending ends. The boundary stayed simple. They do not get access to me. They do not get access to my son. They do not get to use the word family like it is a master key. Access to me is not a family right. And that's the moral. If there has to be one, people who benefit from your silence will call your boundaries cruel the second you enforce them. Let them. Calm facts still win. Screenshots still matter. Timelines matter. Paperwork matters. Kids notice more than we think, which means every time we choose clarity over appeasement, they learn something useful about safety. I used to think staying calm meant giving people one more chance. Now, I think staying calm means ending the argument once the facts are clear. Noah told the truth by accident. I protected it on purpose.